All right. Hi, everybody. I want to talk to you about YouTube podcasts. So I'm going to first share my screen and show you what I mean. If you have been going into your YouTube studio, you may have noticed that there's now a podcasts tab, like I'm showing you here. And when you click on the podcast tab, you probably don't have anything yet, unless you have already changed one of your YouTube playlists into a podcast. So that's really the easiest way to start what's called a YouTube podcast is to either take one of your existing playlists. So I'm just going to take a random one here. Let's say this one. Okay, edit and 1 second here. Okay, and then when you're editing the playlist, you can click on the three dots and click on Set as Podcast. Now, I'm not going to do that right now because I've already done that with a couple of them that I'll show you. But what is the point of setting a YouTube playlist as a podcast? Well, let's take a look. So first of all, um, the what about analytics, for example? Podcast analytics, I'm showing you one of the playlists I've changed into a podcast. Podcast analytics looks to me exactly the same as playlist analytics, except for this little line here. You can get rid of that one. You ignore that. But besides that, look, views, total views, watch time. That's all the same. This is a regular YouTube playlist versus a so-called YouTube podcast. Oh, it doesn't have playlist watch time and watch time total views. It just has views, watch time. So it's actually less interesting maybe. Let's see, content. Yeah, it has views. Let's see, podcasts. Yeah, it has all these same tabs here, right? Except probably less, looks like it's less analytics than the YouTube playlist. Now, the main drawback, okay, the main drawback is that a YouTube podcast does not, let me click on advanced mode. Okay, advanced mode, same thing with playlist. Let me go and go back to the playlist analytics has advanced mode too. So both the podcast analytics, playlist analytics, both have advanced mode. So thus far, YouTube playlist, YouTube podcast seems exactly the same thing. The deceptive part about YouTube podcasts is that it does not give you an RSS feed. What does that mean? That means you cannot distribute your YouTube podcasts onto Apple Podcasts, onto Spotify, onto Overcast, onto Stitcher. I don't know if Stitcher's still a thing, but it's you can't distribute your YouTube podcast as an audio podcast onto most of the podcasting platforms. So what's the point? What's the point of having a YouTube podcast? Well, the point is that YouTube podcasting at this time, as when I'm recording this, December of 2023, it's more of a podcasting distribution platform itself, not a podcasting host. Okay. Whereas, for example, Substack is now a podcast, it's a free podcast host as of this recording. You put your podcast into Substack, you can distribute that podcast onto Apple, Spotify, etc. And you can even distribute your audio podcast onto YouTube through the RSS mode. So you look, it says, look, you can look for this help document. Distribute podcasts on YouTube. You can basically submit your RSS feed, learn how to connect your RSS feed to YouTube to submit that. So what's again, YouTube podcast is not a hosting platform at this time. It's a distribution platform. So why would you want to distribute your podcast on YouTube podcast distribution network? Why? Because YouTube Music is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. Google Podcast, which is a podcasting distribution, podcatcher, podcasting software, and Google Podcast is going to be subsumed into YouTube Music or YouTube Podcasts. YouTube Music is now a very big thing now. People go there to listen to music, but not only music, podcasts as well. So people go to YouTube Music, they can click on podcasts, and they can, add shows that they want to listen to via YouTube Music, etc. And YouTube also has, whoops, let me go ahead and show you. YouTube also has a podcasts, youtube.com/podcasts is a thing now. They haven't promoted it that much, but I think they will promote it more and more, given that Google Podcasts is going away and becoming YouTube Podcasts. Now, YouTube Podcast right now only has the biggest podcasts, right? They have NBC and Lex Friedman and Diary of C. It's a really big podcast, Mr. Beast type stuff. These are all really popular, really big, and even the recommended episodes are like tens of thousands, hundreds of. Okay, this one is so-called small, but it's Aubrey Marcus, so let's see, he's a really big influencer. So YouTube podcast is going to become a bigger and bigger thing. So it's a good idea to basically turn your YouTube playlists into podcasts, just like I showed you earlier in this video. And also to take your existing podcast that you uploaded to Substack or, you know, um, wherever you put your audio podcast, take that RSS and bring it into to YouTube as well. You might as well. So this is basically what I wanted to share with you. The reason I made this video is because I was really confused. YouTube podcast, how come I can't distribute it to Apple or Spotify? You can't. YouTube has its trying to be its own distribution platform. In the future, I'm hoping they get wise and allow us to take RSS from the YouTube podcast and distribute that out to Apple and Spotify as well. But maybe they won't. Maybe they just really want to make it a walled garden for themselves and just have everybody else come over to YouTube to distribute their podcasts and essentially host their podcasts as YouTube videos. But going from YouTube podcasts out to Apple, Spotify, it's not possible at this time. So if you have any other thoughts about YouTube podcasts as a hosting place or as a distribution platform, go ahead and comment below. I'd love